Hey, Story Geeks, you call him Dr. Jones. On today's show, we're digging deeper into Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. If you're listening to the audio version, welcome to How Stories Work. And if you're watching the video, welcome to the Story Geek Show, officially part of the Orange Grove 55 network. As just about always with the Story Geek Show and How Stories Work, this show will be spoiler filled. If you haven't seen Temple of Doom yet, I'm not sure we can be friends. So there is that. But hopefully you've seen it and you're willing to listen along here. Also, as a quick note, after I finish recording with the OG crew here, I'll also be recording a separate How Stories Work segment about what works and maybe doesn't work about the storytelling in Temple of Doom. So check that out on How Stories Work. Either on the YouTube channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, just listen to the end of this particular show and it'll be there. In the meantime, let me introduce my fellow co-hosts on the OG55 channel. We'll start with the namesake of the channel himself, Mr. OG55. How you doing, OG?
I am doing fantastic. Jay, thanks for having me on Story Geek. Talk a little Indiana Jones today. It'll be a good time. Looking forward to it, brother.
Yeah, as always. Now, you said you just watched Temple of Doom, so you're fresh.
I did. I'm fresh out. I watched it yesterday, just to kind of
awesome.
just to kind of like refresh myself a little bit before today's show, and love this movie.
OG's in here doing the work. Tell the folks where they can find you
besides
this YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. You can find me right here on Orange Grove 55 YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter, which is at Orange Grove 55. Where I talk all kinds of things. I talk a lot about theme parks, but I also dip into movie stuff, studio stuff, all kinds of stuff, pop culture, whatever. So check me out on Twitter if you can.
Toss in a little Blackpink here and there.
You know what I'm saying? A little Blackpink in there as well. I'm a new fan, Digging that.
I love it. By the way, that sound effect is one of my favorite sound effects. I was just playing that for my wife this morning because it was on a Instagram reel, and we're like, that's so cool. What? How is that so cool? That's awesome.
That's awesome.
It is. There it is.
So good.
And so thanks for joining us, OG.
Funny thing about that little jingle though, it's actually my text alert as well. So every time he does it, I look at my phone.
No way! That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, it would never work for me because I'm always on only vibrate. I never have a sound play on my phone for whatever reason. So I can't get any cool things like that. Also joining us today, what we call him last week, the archaeologist. We can call him this week the expert in the occult. We can call him the lawyer of lawyers. We can call him producer Dre. Mr. VashSky is in the house. How you doing, Dre?
Well, I do appreciate it. Thank you so much for the for the intro. As Ramsey would say, better than I deserve. That's for sure right there. But yeah, it's been quite an incredible day right there. I was supposed to watch Temple of Doom along with OG55 to brush up myself, but unfortunately got caught up with a couple of things that came up spontaneously. So, well, here we are. I haven't brushed up on it quite as much as I would have liked to, but I think I have some fun stories for you and some interesting little tidbits that we can include here on this discussion. So, should be a fascinating time. If anybody wants to go ahead and follow me on Twitter, you can go do so right down there at VashSky. Just go ahead and type it in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Waistlines McCarthy used to say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55. We have some amazing shows on this network, including the one you're watching right now, hosted by the amazing Jay Sherer, right up there. Story Geeks with Jay, where we talk about the stories that impact our lives. Right now, we're talking about all kinds of stuff on Indiana Jones, as one could imagine, in lead up to Dial of Destiny. So that would be a lot of fun right there. The original flavor, Orange Grove 55, and the original Orange Nerd right there up top, where we talk about everything related to the Walt Disney Company. C-suite, executives, entertainment media, all that good stuff. We have our Citrus Corner hosted by the amazing Citrus George, talking about all things Walt Disney World news and Walt Disney World related stories and so forth. And my own show, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Now, Dre, I wanted to ask you, is Christine Waistlines McCarthy in a very robust unemployment line right now?
No, well, actually, she's not. She's still an advisor, and she'll get her golden parachute. Don't even worry about OG. Yeah. She'll be just fine.
She's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, she'll be
Can't
fine.
say the same about Todd Newton though. That's a whole different story right there. But
Ooh, I don't know
We'll
if
see.
I heard that news. I don't know if I heard that news.
Yeah,
I'll have to
Latondra
listen to
Newton.
I'll have to listen to Orange Nerd or any one of these other amazing podcasts that you guys put together and fill myself in.
Exactly.
Thank you guys for joining me. Dre joined me last week to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark. We both raved about that. It was a fantastic podcast. Definitely go back and listen to that one if you haven't yet. It was a really good time with Michael Gordon. So let's jump into this about Temple of Doom. We'll start here. Temple of Doom is different than Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's also a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, even though they never announced that. You have to work that out with some of the timing of everything. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Temple of Doom takes place in 1935 and Raiders takes place in 1936. And I believe Crusade takes place in 1938. But somebody out there can fact check me on that and see if I've got the dates right there. But this is technically a prequel. So, OG, I'll start with you because Dre and I we said 10 out of 10 for Raiders. Okay. So let me get your Raiders scale since we didn't get that last week, and then I want you to give me your scale of 1 to 10 for Temple as well.
Okay, so my Raiders would be an 8.5, pretty high. Pretty high.
We'll see you later. Have a good day. If it's not 10,
8.5, and I would rate Temple just a little bit below that at an 8.
Okay. So
that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Still pretty solid. We're gonna get into some reasons why it's an 8 in a minute here. But Dre, what do you think? Scale of 1 to 10. What is Temple for you?
Yeah, I think Temple of Doom, had to give Raiders of the Lost Ark a 10 just because, as we said before, right? It's an amazing film, right? Great action film, great film in general on the, top 100 lists for many, many critics out there. I think for the general public, especially those who grew up in that time period and have seen the film, actually. I mean, a lot of people would include it in the top 5. Whereas Temple of Doom doesn't quite score as highly, neither in public sentiment or when, comparing all of the Indiana Jones films specifically. Obviously, it rates much higher than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I would imagine Tile of Destiny when it comes out, but we'll see. The reviews still are flooding in as we speak right there.
That's actually officially fresh right now on Rotten Tomatoes. It's gotten up quite a bit.
Oh, really?
It's like 60-something% now, which is still, but it's gone up. Yeah, it's officially fresh now.
I see. Well, I think still Temple of Doom gonna hold its own right there.
I'm sure.
And look, some of those critiques and so forth, I'll have to acknowledge, and I'll get into more in depth as we go along here, obviously, in this whole thing. But I'm gonna have to go 8.5, somewhere around there. It's doesn't quite reach the heights that Raiders of the Lost Ark does for me personally. If I have to decide on one, all right, we'll go 8.5. We'll go 8.5 right there. Because it's still very high. It just has some issues. Heck. Maybe my score might change while we're discussing it. We'll see.
You never know. You never know where we're going to go with this. I think I'll probably be the highest one on this particular podcast. That is not to say that the movie does not have problems, and we will talk about that in just a few questions because it's going to come up pretty quick here. But for me, I'm still giving it a 9 despite the problems that it does have. So we'll talk about why that is, like what the problems are and all that good stuff as we move through this. But I'm going to give it a solid 9, predominantly because of the character of Indiana Jones in Temple of Doom. I think maintains a very, very high standard, which is fantastic to see. So let me ask you this question. I'll start with you this time, Dre. I think if you were to go and see, we didn't have this experience because we were all too young, I think. Sure. To go see this in the theater. By the way, some of the people I've listened to online saw this movie way too young in the theater. Their parents did not know what to expect, and they took them in to see it.
And we'll talk about that as well, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I'm sure we will. My my parents didn't let me watch this for a long time, so I watched this on this was my third Indiana Jones film because my parents would not let me watch it for a really long time. Fun fact too, by the way, and this I'll just throw it out there now. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is one of the primary reasons that we have a PG-13 rating for the MPAA. Because essentially what happened was the MPAA looked at Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and they said, this seems like it can't be rated R, but it seems like it should be rated R. And Steven Spielberg actually suggested to the MPAA that they have another rating, and they said that's a good idea. How about PG-13? And then of course now we have that. So technically, if you go look up Temple of Doom right now, it'll have a PG rating because they have not gone back. They didn't go back and change them. So it's kind of interesting. But what were you gonna say, Dre?
Well, a lot of people accused Steven Spielberg of being maybe a little bit too cozy, maybe having a little bit too much influence over the MPAA, and that's how they got their rating of PG like because Steven Spielberg, after all. And I can understand that. I mean, are we to believe that if this movie was made by anybody else, it would have that PG rating? There would be enough pull there in Hollywood to pull that off? I'm not so sure there. No. So you had to have something in between this and Gremlins. Biggest contributing factors for why we have the PG-13 rating, or as they, I guess, said at the time, kid adult films or whatever. You know, it's just like, it's just, it's something in the middle.
You know, I will say this though. It just is my personal opinion on the matter, but I actually think Temple of Doom, in terms of the title, is the best title of the whole series. Actually, I really like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The title, compared to all the other. Yeah, it's a great name. You know.
Yeah. It's a great
best name of all of them, I think.
And
you could be right. And we're going to get into this, but it is also for other works that appear outside of the filmography. It is also like a really popular use of Temple of is used multiple times in other kinds of attractions and things. So
speaking of the title, by the way, can I share my screen there, OG? Just real fast. Look at that brilliant way that the title is revealed right here. You know, with Willie Scott and her performance right here. We'll get into the intro, of course, but I just think that is freaking awesome. I always thought that was old school movie magic right there. I was like, wow, how'd they do that? Back in the day. And well, it's easy to do it now, but I just think that's great. That's just fantastic, and it really amps up the sense of adventure. And I will agree with you, OG. Great title.
Yeah, and for anybody listening in, what we're looking at right now is the very opening of the film when Willie has come out to sing, and the Indiana Jones logo and type font underneath that says Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is behind Willie, but in front of her background dancers. And it is phenomenal. You're right, Dre. It is a great introduction here. But let's get into this question. It's a perfect segue. If you were to walk in and sit in a theater and this movie starts, now we've seen the title is up there on the screen, but this is a different opening for sure as we just open up into this basically a musical number. So I'm wondering, Dre, how do you feel seeing this opening, and then how do you compare it to the other openings in the Indiana Jones franchise? How does this hold up? Because to me, it feels like the most different opening that we've seen.
It absolutely is the most different opening that we've ever seen. That is for sure. I mean, it's I don't know if it's old school, new school. I don't know, like where George is wild with his throwbacks and callbacks to the films that he saw growing up, but it's I don't know. It's definitely got that old school, maybe Casablanca kind of feel to it or something. You know what I'm saying? And it's definitely different. I will say this though, I think it works, and I think it works quite well. I would actually rate this intro, the whole entire intro piece from Club Obi-Wan and all that. I don't know. I mean, Raiders has its intro. It just can't be topped. It's one of the best intros for any movie ever. It's also one of the, as we discussed last week there, Jay, one of the best character intros that we've ever seen, right? To establish the character of Indiana Jones and so forth, all that. This one is over-the-top madness. And I would have to say that I think it's the second best one. I'm not really a fan of how Crystal Skull, or even for that matter, how Last Crusade open. We'll get into that when we get into the Last Crusade talk and why I'm not like super fond of it. I actually like it, Temple of Doom's intro quite a bit. It's just so different, it's just so unique. It sets a very interesting tone. Starts off in Shanghai, which I guess they were going to have an intro starting off in Shanghai for the last picture, which is interesting. And then they adapted those ideas for this. Club Obi-Wan, great reference, right? And he just goes... Indy goes bananas in this whole thing, right? He starts out suave and cool, right? He's got the white jacket on, which is a great callback to James Bond, a character that he was very much based off of, right? But he's got the cool jacket, he's got the swagger, sits down, he's all cool, collected, and you're thinking, oh, okay, whatever he gets into, he'll handle it like James Bond, cool and collected, right? No, he just goes off and just destroys everything, and it's amazing. He's rough and tumble this whole entire time. The whole big gong, spins out, and it takes Willie, and they dodge the machine gun fire. This thing is awesome. This thing is great. So I don't know. I really love it. And if Raiders intro didn't exist, this might be the best one.
Well, and the great thing about this intro is that it's not, he's not in his archaeologist kind of environment, right?
Right.
He's not exploring some temple or whatever. He's in a completely different environment. But the energy though in this opening is every bit Indiana Jones, like you were talking about, Dre, that bombastic thing with the gong rolling and the machine gun fire. It goes big, but it does it in a different way. I think it's really creative. I really enjoy the intro. I really do. I think it was done in a way that feels like Indiana Jones, but it's different enough. I think it would be kind of boring or kind of stale to kind of open this movie with him searching through a temple or a cave or something. I think this was a really creative way to sort of introduce this film, and I think they handled it beautifully, absolutely beautifully. And I'm sorry, Willie's hilarious. I know some people kind of get annoyed with her because she's like scared of everything, but this is so good. This is so good. And the other thing that's really important, I think, about this scene is it sort of sets up the dynamics between these two characters, and we'll get into that in a little bit with some of these other topics we're going to be discussing today. But you really see the kind of like this masculine guy in Indiana Jones and how he sort of handles females, which I think is very, very important to his character. So overall, love this intro.
There's a question later on that
there
we
is,
get into his kind of thing with females. But look, starting off here, Willie is a star in Shanghai, and she's been pampered her pretty much entire life after she leaves. What is her home state? It's not Kansas. It's some kind of Midwest state, right?
It is,
almost like a Marilyn Monroe type background, and she makes her way to Hollywood. In this case, makes her way to Shanghai, and been pampered her entire life. What would a person like that? How would she react in all of these situations in the film? I think it's pretty accurate. And I don't think, I believe it's Kate, what was her name again?
Capshaw.
Capshaw?
Yep, Kate Capshaw.
And isn't she married to
Spielberg's wife?
Yeah, Steven Spielberg's wife.
They met on this movie, yeah.
Kate Capshaw. I do apologize. Yeah, they met on this movie, married after this movie. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were going through a divorce, which impacts a lot of what we actually see on screen. Very interesting right here. But, she's not given the greatest part, obviously, but she handles it really, really well.
Right.
Now, she screams a whole lot. You're going to have that screen emblazoned in your brain. You will never be able not to hear that scream. However, I think with what she's given, I think she actually does it really, really phenomenally. And a lot of people don't give her credit for that, I don't think.
No, they have chemistry. These two have chemistry throughout the whole film. The whole film. They're really well done.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you guys more. I think that this intro is phenomenal. I love the intro. I love that we're not going back and looking for an artifact to start out, but the artifact has already been found. And now we're seeing how Indiana Jones has to deal with some of the people that he's working for. And note, too, that you can see why Indiana Jones is so skeptical of doing work for private investors later on in life, because the first private investor that he works for, who he thinks he's giving the artifact back to the people who should have it, and yet they're trying to screw him over this whole time. So there's some intricate details here of how, and this is one thing that I think that George Lucas is really good at. George Lucas, he does, like you said earlier, Dre, he is a wild boy. But one of the things that he's awesome at is that he knows his characters, and he has for sure has a book of information about what has gone on in his characters' lives and knows exactly how to pull from that. He's just really amazing at that. So this scene is amazing. I love the part where his buddy, who's backing him up in the club, gets shot, and he's holding him as he's dying, and he goes, between the two of us, Indy, I'm going on the next adventure into the great beyond first. And that was just a cool moment where like the stakes are high. We know that this is an intense situation. And the way that it plays out, I think the next question, my segue into the next question is that there's a lot of silliness in Temple of Doom. But in my opinion, we don't see any of that. We don't go too far with that silliness in any of this first portion of it. This still feels like it's an adventure film that hasn't gone into cartoon world yet. Now, we might go into cartoon world in a bit as we like transition to this next question, but in this opening sequence, it pushes the boundary just far enough, and in my opinion, never goes over it. Even when he's running behind the thing, you go, it probably wouldn't fall like that. It probably wouldn't roll like that, but it's fine because this is Indiana Jones. It's funny to see the ice on the ground and Willie's trying to look for the diamond amongst the ice. That's kind of clever. Her attitude and the way she's behaving, I think you nailed it, Dre. This is kind of like the way that kind of person would act. This is a person who's dreams of stardom, but had to go to Shanghai to be able to work in the business, so to speak, because she probably didn't get a job in Hollywood, right? So, and the fact that they have the Tommy guns, and the fact that they come in here and do like a gangster style club, and very much a 1930s style big band kind of club, only in Shanghai, all amazing. I love it all. The introduction of Short Round, which we're going to see in a minute here, fantastic. So let me transition into this question. Temple of Doom feels far more ludicrous, or maybe a better word is silly, compared to Raiders. Indy's got a sidekick. Willie is over the top, and as you mentioned, Dre, is very screamy. But there's a lot more humor actually in this sequel than there is in the first film too. One of the definitions that I've said is this feels a lot more George Lucas-y, right? George Lucas likes this kind of stuff. He likes to throw in a fart joke into Star Wars. Like he's that kind of guy. He wants to do a lot of different kinds of things. So my question, I'll start with you on this one, OG.
Sure.
What works and what doesn't work about the tonal differences between Raiders and Temple for you?
I think I actually like the tone of Temple of Doom. I think that the silliness or the quirky George Lucas stuff, it kind of offsets some pretty heavy material in this movie. I mean, you're talking about, like there's child slaves, right? And you have a guy ripping people's hearts out, like literally ripping their hearts out. It's pretty intense stuff. And I think that the banter between like Short Round and Indy and Willie and stuff, it lightens the mood where it needs to. And for me personally, it never goes too far. Like, and I'm not really a big, look, I make no bones about it. I'm not really a big fan of like cornball humor. It's one of the reasons why I do not like Thor Ragnarok. I know a lot of fans love that movie, but it's just, that's the kind of humor that I find really, really obnoxious. The stuff in this movie though, it's not, for me personally, it doesn't feel like it ever crosses that line. You have Willie who's scared and screaming and yelling and screechy, and you have Short Round doing his thing, and there's silly elements in it, but I feel like I'm never taken out of the adventure. I feel like it's never like out of place. So it works for me. It absolutely works for me. And like I said, it offsets some pretty heavy subject material that you see throughout the film. So I don't know.
Yeah, that works. What do you think, Dre?
I dig the tone. And look, I do agree with OG here. I think the humor was put in to offset a lot of the very dark subject matter that you actually have in here. I mean, we've got, Indy being possessed basically by a Indian god almost, right? You have, slave children, you have, guy getting his heart ripped out, like OG said. You have guys, getting killed by crocodiles down there. I mean, it's tough. It's rough. So you kind of had to have a little bit of humor. They do it right here after the Dan Aykroyd cameo, by the way.
Yes, that's
real
right.
Fast. It's like, yeah, we're getting away, and it's like, no, you're not. You're not getting away at all. And they have their little fun right there. It's just something to kind of offset a lot of the deep dark subject matter that is featured in here. Man, Willie is, I think, an extension of that. Again, was that maybe they went a little bit too far for her with her, probably, right? She is the butt of a few of her own jokes right there, but India gets it too. So, who's to say that that those were bad creative choices at the time? I do agree with OG though. I kind of like the tone though. I kind of like how there is a little bit of humor in there and doesn't take itself super seriously. I think that's important for an action adventure film like this.
I think it's really tough for some of these films because the question is, when have you gone too far? And that is a subjective question for every single person who steps into the theater to watch it. For me, there are only, I would say, two places where they go too far for me. Those two places are the raft scene coming out of the plane. It was just now. This is an interesting take, though. We'll talk about this when we talk about Crystal Skull. Like, what's not too far for me is him getting in the refrigerator and getting blown out of the city. I know it's ridiculous, but it doesn't bother me as much as the raft scene does, to be honest with you. Wow. For whatever reason, it just doesn't bother me as much. But what I was bothered with I think the most ludicrous thing we've seen in an Indiana Jones film, and the one that bothers me the most, is Mutt swashbuckling across the Jeeps, right? Like that, I cannot stand. Like that has gone so far. It's ridiculous.
That's rough. Rough. Really rough. We'll get into that, rough. I'm sure, when we get to Crystal Skull.
We will.
Him vining across the whole thing with the monkeys. Oh, it's rough, man. There's no question there. I'll agree with you.
No question. So I think in this film specifically, the raft scene bothers me. It takes me out of it a little bit. And then the other scene that Willie's persona does bother me a tad as we get closer and closer to the end of the film, because there's very few points in the film where I feel like she's asked to use any strengths to help overcome anything. She kind of just bumbles into things constantly. And that's fine. I do think, to your point, OG, it is a counterbalance to the intense subject material, and it's not like it doesn't take me out of it totally. But it does kind of make me go, okay, when they jump the mine train onto the other track, I'm okay with that. When the big thing of water bursts out of the side, I'm okay with that. Short round driving the car, I actually really love the humor around the fire at night, where she thinks that the elephant is grabbing her and she throws it. Here's the reason why Temple of Doom still gets a 9 for me. Is even though I dislike the raft scene and I have some problems with Willie, I love when she's used for comedy, but it's almost like she's always the comic relief.
Right.
I think the reason it still gets a 9 is because Indiana Jones does not change. Harrison Ford plays it the exact same way he played it in Raiders. There's no difference in the way that he responds to all of the things happening around him. He is not becoming. You could argue that there's a little bit of silliness between him and Willie in the love scene where they're in the separate rooms and they're deciding who's going to go back to whose room. There's a little bit of silliness in Harrison Ford there, but it's not outside the realm of his interaction with Marion, where he was like, I hurt here and I hurt here, and he's pointing to his face and his elbow and stuff. So for me, I think that it's still the glue is still held together by Harrison Ford, and that's why this movie doesn't completely just rip me out of it and be like it's Crystal Skull levels of like irritation for me. So yeah, I think we all like it, and then, yes, there is some tonal differences, but for the most part, you guys, it works for you, and for the most part, it works for me. Those are the only things that like I take it down a notch. But go ahead, OG.
And I also think that there is an element of like the era that this film was made in, you know, like I think that audiences are a little different now. Yeah, I think back then it was different in how they approached these big blockbusters compared to now. I think audiences now are actually like a little bit more, their approach to film is a little bit more analytical, just even the normies, you know? And I think that back then you can get away with, you know, maybe the raft coming off the plane, landing on the mountain and the whole thing, where nowadays audiences question things a little bit more. And you even see that like with Disney animation, right? Like you could do a fairy tale in the 1960s, 70s, even 80s, where, love at first sight, yada, yada, yada. And audiences sort of accepted that, where now audiences question that. Like, well, why would she fall in love at first sight? Well, who does that? You know, audiences question things a lot more now, I think. So I do think there is an element of like, we're in a different time period too now than we were, I think, in like 1984. So that's a part of it.
I think you're right. I mean, this was we talked about this last week, Dre, but you know, Big Trouble in Little China came out around the same time, right? So like you had like and Back to the Future came out around this time. So this was definitely a year later. Actually, I think 85 was Back to the Future. So it is, they did take bigger swings. Let's put it that way. Go ahead, Dre.
Much bigger swings. I mean, the scale of this picture is way bigger than Raiders, if it's even possible. Raiders was already a big film, but this is just massive. This is huge. Some of the set pieces are just enormous, you know, especially when you get into some of the mine car scenes and stuff like that. It's like, how big is this film and how big are we getting? The locales are distinctly different than anything we've ever seen before. I mean, it doesn't even go back to America even once, you know. It just it stays on this part of the continent. This part of the world, and it's just huge. You can really get that sense of that locale. Not maybe the most accurate representation of that locale, right? A very exotic take on that, both literally and philosophically, maybe. But I compliment the film in that way for taking that big swing and doing it. I understand, you know, now with our 2023 eyes, right? We all look at this a little bit differently now. But again, these are time capsules, right? These are harkening back to another time, and this film harkens back to even a time even before it. And so, with that kind of jump there, I think it's okay. But man, this is quite the adventure right here. It's like it literally becomes a roller coaster at one point, right?
Yeah,
with the mine car scene, and you're on it for the entire time. Some of the series' best action sequences are actually in this film. Interestingly enough.
Well, and I think this sort of this bombastic approach to adventure in this movie sort of solidified Indiana Jones as being synonymous with adventure, you know? I mean, when you think of adventure, you think of this man, you know? So, and I think this film played a big part of that. I really do.
Yeah, before I transition us into question 4, which is a little heavier, I will say that one of the ways that the tone is nailed is in the scene where Indy and Short Round are in the chamber that is basically trying to kill them. The ceiling is coming down with the spikes, and Willie has to come in and go through the bugs to be able to release the lever and then release them from being able to be in that space. And, you know, even then, as silly as Indiana Jones is going to get, is him going, "We are going to die," and the spikes coming down through his hat, and the way that that Willie is interacting with that seems on character still, and so that's where the film pushes it to the point where I go, this actually feels still very much like Indiana Jones to me, and then kind of nail it right there. So I do love that part of the tone too.
That scene right there is one of the best scenes, like one of my favorite scenes of all time. I mean, it's just the music from John Williams sets the tone right off the bat. The dun, 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 it just kind of goes up, builds up. So you've got that going on. The editing is just perfect. The interplay between characters is just phenomenal right there, and that all gets kind of amped up as she makes her way down to the caverns and she discovers what it is, and she freaks out, and it's like you got Indy right there. He's kind of helpless, can't really do anything, right? He's relying on Willie to actually save them, which, by the way, if you're looking for her to do something, she did save Indy and save the entire adventure. So there you go. She did something like that. but it's relying on her, and she is not at all in a comfortable position right now, according to her character. And it's just the tension is palpable. Yes. You can just feel it. It's amazing, And this was so good. They not only took one element of this for the actual attraction, which we'll talk about later on in this discussion, but they took two because it was so good, so iconic. I'm telling you, like this scene right here, I mean, you stack them up against any of the other Indiana Joneses, other action films, I would say, this is right up there.
Well, and from a storytelling perspective, from like a movie making perspective, like I think that like you hit the nail on the head, Dre. Depending on Willie to save them added to that tension. Like you're stressed the hell out.
yeah.
Because like you're like, oh, how is this girl gonna do this? Like she can't even handle the bugs. Like what are we doing here? It really amped up that tension. It's fantastic.
It's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and to double down on your point, Dre, about the John Williams music at this portion of the film, the fact that he speeds up that track when it doubles down and it starts going again, it just is like, could you ask for a more perfect soundtrack to go alongside what is happening on screen? I mean, it's just brilliance. It's brilliance. So there's a lot here that is so amazing. I'm gonna talk Dre into rating it a 9 out of 10 by the end of the
you might actually with a scene this good, 8.5 might be selling short, but not there yet.
I gotta say, I'm really bad at rating stuff, like just like on a personal level. Like I have a hard time with my mind. It's very hard for me to do that. I gave this an 8, but yeah, it probably is closer to a 9. It's pretty good. So I don't know.
Short Round's yelling at you. He's like, "Hey, you rate this higher."
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is a little bit heavier of a question, but just like in Raiders, Indy doesn't initially believe in destiny or the supernatural when he shows up. In fact, his motivation in Raiders and Temple is finding a notable historical artifact. Now, I do want to comment on this really quickly. Temple of Doom sort of doubles down on that by potentially suggesting that Indy is in this for fortune and glory. And I just listened to another podcast where they actually emphasize that he's in it for fortune and glory. And I just have to say, I have always read those lines from him as sarcasm. He's not being like, I'm in this for fortune and glory per se. He's saying that other people are, and kind of like making light of the situation. Like, we're doing this for fortune and glory. I don't think he's really doing it for fortune and glory. So I just want to make a note about that. But he is in it to find the artifacts, not so much because he believes in the spirituality of the people who are asking him to do this, at least to start with. But in both films, the supernatural is evident. God in the first film, and then Shiva and Kali in the second film, both Hindu gods here. So, Dre, I'll start with you. What's important about switching from the Judeo-Christian supernatural into this Hindu supernatural? And then how do you personally respond to that based on as a moviegoer, seeing a completely different take on a different supernatural aspect?
Well, as the indie films went along, I know one of George Lucas's biggest struggle was coming up with artifacts in which to actually rescue or, interweave into the plot or whatever. I mean, it's an Indiana Jones staple, but how do you keep, doing it? That's why I think the video games and some of the ancillary material kind of expanded out and included like the Lost City of Atlantis, for example, or the Fountain of Youth and all that. So it's not every time it's an artifact. Maybe it's a place, location, and that. But for the actual films. It's usually always an artifact. So this is I think it was wise to get away from maybe Judeo-Christian artifacts, if only to kind of expand the universe out and to incorporate some other elements in there. I think the what is it, the Shankara stones, I believe is what they're called. I think they're pretty strong. They kind of play a little bit with aspects of this kind of Indian folklore, let's say, but maybe you could have said they maybe go farther. We don't truly know what their powers are and why they're looking for them. I know it's reverential to the people there, but if there were maybe a little bit more supernatural element to it to kind of create a sense of like, oh, you do not want these to fall in the wrong hands, I think would have upped the ante just a little bit right there. But I'm actually okay with them delving into other cultures and their relics because I think it's appropriate. Look, I think the Egyptians probably had something. The South Americans had something, which, ooh, that's interesting, crystal skull. But they would all have kind of these things for which are highly praised items in Indiana Jones's line of work. So yeah, I think it's good. I don't really necessarily come at it from a religious perspective. I come at it from a more of an entertainment perspective, and on that note, I think it fits the series.
Yeah, I think it's smart. Like, I agree with you, Dre. It's smart filmmaking on an entertainment level, because here you have an archaeologist. I mean, it would be like malpractice almost not to dip into other regions, religions, and things like that. Like he's globetrotting. So you're gonna have Hindu, you're gonna have Christian, you're gonna have all these other religions involved with these artifacts and what have you. So I think it was a smart move, a necessary move. We get into another question coming up about the bad guys going from the Nazis to the to this Chinese crime boss, right. Stuff like that. I think is also good because again, Indiana Jones is a global kind of explorer, and you're going to want to dip into as much of that as you can. So yeah, from an entertainment standpoint, I think it's spot on. I think it's exactly what you do with this kind of character. Yeah. I'm all in. I'm a little disappointed that we're hearing that they kind of go back to the Nazis again in Dial of Destiny, but we'll see how that works in execution, because I really do like the variety more than continuously kind of going to the same but we'll see how it's handled. We haven't seen that movie yet, so it might be fantastic. But
hopefully we can actually say their names on here.
That's true. Yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll find out.
Oh, gee, you might have to edit this. But the 1940s Germans of ill repute. It's I like it when Indy punches those sect of Germans right there. It's satisfying when you know the history and everything like that. But I do agree with you, OG. I like the variety of villains, of forces that he has to overcome, right? And like I said before, this kind of shows the range, not only in terms of artifact, but in the people that he's kind of up against right here. It shows the range of like who he is up against, not just the I think it's the Dougie cult that he's kind of going against right here, but also like back in Shanghai with them on his tail right there. That kind of shows that like his character maybe in the form of Han Solo, he's pissing off people left and right.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's not only interesting from an entertainment standpoint. I think it's also critical to the larger world that Indiana Jones populates, because Indiana Jones is, I think if you were to say Indiana Jones is a subtle attempt for George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to prove that Judeo-Christian background religion is the most important thing in the world and other religions aren't, it would feel so awkward. It'd be like, why? These are not the guys I'm looking to prove this point. And instead what we see is Indy get to experience other people's cultures the same kinds of belief systems that they put on things are evident, but it's done in the way that they would do it, not in the way that the American population would do it or see it. So we can see things the way that we can see, basically, as Indiana Jones is quintessentially American, I think you'd call him. And he is interacting with all of these other things, and all of these other things are new and different and foreign, and he has to learn about what he believes and what he doesn't believe based on interacting with these things. And I think that's a very it's a very good tactic to take in this era, especially in the 80s as well, as you're looking at the globalization of the planet as opposed to any kind of nationalistic takes on things. Now we're getting to see an American out of his element, and how does he deal with this stuff? And I've found it always really fascinating, and I always find that I thought there was a line in the film too where Molaram, the guy who tears hearts out of people, when Molaram says to Indy, like, as soon as we get all 5 Sankara stones, we're going after the Christian god. Then we're going after the Islamic god. Then we're going to rule the world with what we've got here, the Sankara stones. Basically saying that Kali is going to rule the world based on what they're going to be able to do. And I wish, like Dre said, that was more apparent about how all of that stuff was going to happen, because we talked a lot about this with Raiders, but we got an expository scene where they basically told us these are the implications of dealing with the Ark. We don't get that quite here because we don't really know what the power of the stones are. We get the people who ask Indy to help them basically say, like, the stones are important to us because they bring about prosperity. And then when we see Molaram, he's basically like, I'm going to rule the world with these stones, but we don't really know what the stones actually do, right? We don't see that. We don't get a feel for that. I think it's a little harder for us to connect to it. Does it matter to the overarching storyline and to the point? I don't think so, but it would have upped the stakes for us a little bit, I think. Now, granted, having a guy pulling hearts out of people ups the stakes, right? Like, that's the Conan argument. It works there, and that's fine. Before we get into this question I've got for you guys about the relationship, since you already touched on this, OG, I do want to talk about the villain. So you'd kind of mentioned, hey, we're seeing Chinese organized crime in Shanghai. With Lao Che, we are seeing the thuggy cult led by a priest, Molaram, who's tearing hearts out of people. This is definitely different from Indy going up against bad Germans, right? So so you kind of touched on it, OG, so I'll start with you. We've seen in this whole series, we've seen the German party that was fascist. We've seen the Russians who were communists. We've seen Chinese organized crime. Dial of Destiny feels like it's going to bring back actually some former German scientists, maybe who are doing some bad things. What works for Indiana Jones enemies? And maybe what doesn't work for Indiana Jones enemies in your view, OG?
It's interesting how it's sort of seen through that American lens, like who the bad guys are, right? Very interesting, you know? Yeah. So obviously the Germans, I mean, that's the universal bad guy. But even like the Chinese and stuff, we're kind of like frenemies with them. We're not like super cozy, you know. So that's kind of interesting. I think it's important, and I think like very much like the spiritual, religious stuff. I think it adds when you have a variety of bad guys or gals, whatever, from different cultures, and it makes for better entertainment. You know, it just does. And with this character in particular, who is a globetrotter, you're going to want that, you know? Have we had like a Middle Eastern bad guy in Indiana Jones? I don't think so. We've had, well, he's Indian, this gentleman, right? And we've had the Germans and the Russians and Chinese. We haven't had like Arab bad guy yet, which is
not
interesting.
Really. I could argue that some of the people in Raiders that are helping out the German party, you could argue that they're kind of hired on bad guys, but not as leading anything.
Yeah.
Some of the guys in The Last Crusade maybe, but they actually turned out to be the good guys. So
Right.
that's
Right.
interesting
That's right.
kind of
right.
turn right there. Yeah, I think overwhelmingly the Middle Easterners are allies to
Yeah.
Indiana Jones. Very, very interesting. You say, OG, about the kind of like looking at this from a Western perspective,
Yeah.
especially the 1980s, right? That dynamic really plays out not just in how the villains are depicted here, but also like who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. They have this conversation while they're eating dinner about the British occupation, right? It's like, oh yeah, well we've civilized this this area right here. Well, obviously that's a little controversial right there, and they're actually shown these kind of British influenced Indians who actually save the day at the end, or look to be the good guys right there. And it's like, probably wouldn't do that today with a more holistic understanding of the whole situation right there. But I that is one genuine critique or criticism that you can lay at the doorstep of this movie right here. And I think what they were going for was nostalgia, not only in terms of tone, in terms of depiction and all that, but also in story, characterization, and all those kind of essential elements. And maybe, some nuance would have played out well here.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that as I typed this question out, I was thinking to myself, it feels like I would have loved it if they would have thought back in the 80s that they wanted to do 3 more films in the 90s. Because we could have had a film where Indy went up against the fascists in Italy, right? Italy was a big fascist party at that time. We could have had a scene or a movie that concentrated on Imperial Japan and Indy going up against Imperial Japan, right?
That'd be dope.
That would have been really fascinating.
Cool.
That would have been cool. See, and that's kind of what that's why I love this. I love the playing with the variety, right? What you can bring to the table with this kind of stuff is just amazing. And that's why I'm a little disappointed with the Dial of Destiny rumors with the Germans again. That's why I'm a little bit like, oh man,
Yeah, we have to go back to that well again. And I you kind of understand. There are some people of Hollywood who really get a kick out of that, and I understand why you want to go back to that well, but a little bit what is it? A little bit of a retread of ground for us moviegoers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too that there's this sense with Indiana Jones. This is probably why Indiana Jones fits so well with Disney, is that there is this strong sense of Americana. Now, as you pointed out, Dre, can that strong sense of Americana sometimes get us into trouble in terms of the stories we're telling? Absolutely, and I'm not making any excuses for that. But what I will say is that even in the 80s, what was very evident in America, because after the 80s ended and we entered the 90s, it felt very much to me like a young person that all of a sudden we were opening ourselves up to the world with this globalized society that we, especially as the internet started coming out, we started to hear stories about how people did things in other countries, and you could no longer paint people in another country as being one way. Back in the 80s, you could still paint people that way because there wasn't the available the only things we'd learn about Russia were what the Russian government was pushing. We didn't hear about what the people in the cities were dealing with. They were equally outraged by the Russian government, perhaps. And so we just got sort of the propaganda version of what it was to be Russia. And I think that there's something to be said for. I think we've taken maybe one step too, you could argue that the movies of the 80s took one step too far into Americana, where it was like America's obviously the best and everyone else sucks, and we'll tell them how to operate. But I think we've actually taken almost sometimes a step too far the other direction, where we're not even rooting for ourselves anymore, right? And I think that's a bummer, because I would like to see us I would like to see more movies where people were like, yeah, isn't it cool? I think we got this in Top Gun Maverick, ironically.
I think we did.
Isn't it cool to be American? We don't do everything right. For sure, no questions asked. You can point out a lot of reasons why we do a lot of bad things. but also we've done a lot of cool things too. And sometimes
Right.
celebrating some of those things is kind of cool. And I think Indiana Jones a lot of times gives us the ability to celebrate some of those things because we're celebrating Indiana Jones.
And you bring up a great point about Top Gun Maverick. There's a hunger for that out there right now. Like I wish Hollywood would tap into that a little bit more, because I think people are tired of like always feeling like, we suck, right? Like why can't we celebrate America every now and then, right? Like you said, Jay, we're not perfect and we never will be, but we're not terrible either. We have a lot of good stuff too going on, and it'd be fun to kind of get that team spirit back up.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference between celebrating the ideal versus celebrating the actual. And I think that sometimes like Top Gun Maverick gives us the ability to do that, right? Now, what Top Gun Maverick does very strategically and very well is that Top Gun Maverick actually also puts in place the knowledge that not all Americans in this situation are good Americans, right? There's some people that are against what Tom Cruise is about to do in that film, right? Against what Maverick is going to do. And so I think that's a very artful, smart way of handling it. I do think that they probably could have in Top Gun Maverick given us an actual foreign country as opposed to, oh, it's a random foreign country. We don't know who it is, right? Like
it's interesting.
Yeah. Do I care? Are they trying to make more money? Yes, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make more money, not turn off international viewers. Totally cool with that. But I think you could have probably played that, and it probably would have been fine. So let's talk about another area where Indiana Jones. So what we're acknowledging here is that Indiana Jones has a lot of Americana that is really cool, but also it's not bringing any nuance to some of these things. It is a white savior, right? We've heard a lot about that over the course of time. It is, like you mentioned, Dre, the colonial powers from England kind of save the day at the end. So this is not culturally perfect. There's some elements here that we know that are crossing the line there. But another area where people have complained over the years is Indiana Jones and his relationships, or not necessarily his relationships, but the depiction of female characters in Indiana Jones films. And I've been watching, as you guys know, all of the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, formerly known as the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. There's an episode where Freud teaches Indy that love is entirely about sex. It's so weird because Indy's like 8 years old talking to Sigmund Freud. It's very strange. In a later episode, Indy watches his mom, Anna, almost have a fling with an Italian opera maestro. Raiders indicates that Indy has had a past with a much younger Marion Ravenwood, and uncomfortably younger.
That's always been a source of contention right there.
Yeah, exactly.
It was wrong and you knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, and when that was brought up to George Lucas, he kind of just doubled down and was like, yeah, deal with it. This is what happened.
He's like, nope, that's how it is. It's like, wait, what? I think like Steven Spielberg was like, can't we just change her to 18? It'd be really simple, And it's like, nope, not going to do it. I think in the script, she's supposed to be 17 in that part.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, typical George Lucas though. George is like grumpy and he's going to stand his ground. George is
Oh yeah, he had a sister kiss her brother. I mean, he doesn't care. He's gonna be George Lucas. In the Last Crusade, we saw Indy and his father both hook up with Elsa. Here in Temple, Indy and Willie have an interesting interplay. So here's my question for you guys. I'll start with you, OG.
Sure.
What do you make of the romance in Indiana Jones films? Does it work? Does it not work? Why or why not? How do you feel about this?
I think it works really, really well. And I think it's actually kind of a vital part of his character. I think that this kind of like the way that Indiana Jones approaches females adds to his masculinity. And even Han Solo is kind of the same thing, right? Like, would Han Solo be as necessarily as seen as masculine if there wasn't that interaction with Leia, right? His kind of a shit talking kind of, back and forth banter with Leia, right? It adds to his masculinity. I think with these movies, it's the same thing. I think that when you see these interactions, you get a sense of like, this is like the everyman. This is like that really like manly, like old school, like, masculine figure. And these women are sort of like, I don't want to say like, I mean, they play a part in expanding his persona. I think it's absolutely vital. If you didn't have those relationships, I think in these films, I think he would be a lesser character, in my opinion. I think it adds a lot to who Indiana Jones is. That kind of suave, and the cool thing too about it is like he's so like that one scene in this movie where they go into the different rooms, right? It's kind of silly.
Yeah.
But he's the kind of guy where he's like, I'm willing to walk away. I'm not eager. I want her. He's like, I want her so bad. He wants her so bad. He's willing to walk away. Okay, very masculine thing, very alpha kind of traits here. It says a lot about the character. So yeah, no, I like the way his interactions with females were handled. I think it benefits the character quite a bit.
And do you think? What is your take on? How do you feel about the female characters? Like that's another complaint is that so Indy's reaction to the female characters might build him as a character, but if because I've heard it both ways. We had a comment on the last video that was going after us for apparently criticizing Marion too much, which I thought was crazy because we love Marion. Yeah, we love Marion. You can go back and read the comment, Ray. It's interesting.
Wow.
I was like,
yeah, they did. I was actually thinking about even deleting that comment because it wasn't like critical. It was kind of like you said, Jay, they were kind of going after you guys. I was like,
that was
now I
weird.
got to see this here. Hang on here.
I just went and said, I'm not sure you were paying close attention to what we were saying because we all love Marion. What's going on here? But anyway, the point being, and you can always come after us, by the way. I don't mind. If you want to come out and say that I have a crazy opinion, go for it. But what do you think about the actual characterization of the female characters?
Like the characters themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a little different. Yeah. I think they do a better job at like sort of like plussing Indy's character than they are in characters in and of themselves, in my opinion. I don't know. Like I felt like in this movie, like Willie, she's essential to his character, but like I felt like Short Round was a better character though. Like I'm more interested in Short Round as a character, So I don't know. Yeah, the in and of themselves, I think the female characters are kind of, but I think they help Indy quite a bit. What do you think, Dre? What do you think? You think they're solid, or you think that is kind of?
I like the females. I mean, it's a staple for the franchise. Obviously, this was based off of like James Bond. That's kind of what they were going for when it came to including females and how Indiana Jones would interact with them. Right? He's always got to get the gal, and unlike James Bond, they don't always betray him, which is interesting. We do get a betrayal, but it's not in this movie, and I actually like that a lot. As well, but look, I mean, it's he's kind of like the 1930s swashbuckling, adventuring kind of dude, and obviously he's very interesting. Years of field work, by the way, and I think he would be kind of a player a little bit that way. I think it does actually enhance his character. And look, I mean, I just read that comment right there. Okay, hang on here, guys. Man, okay.
Want me to share your screen? Should we have the comment up and we could talk about it? Want to break it down?
Yeah. We can do that right here. So let me go ahead and hopefully, did things freeze again?
Uh-oh. You're kind of coming in and out a little bit, Dre.
Yeah, you
right.
got like
I'll get back in.
Problem.
Give me a second.
Okay, no problem.
I'll give you my take before Dre comes back.
Sure.
I think that what you said is a very artful way of putting it, OG, because here's the problem, right? The more focused a story is, the more it's going to effectively accomplish what it's intending to do. Right. One of the things that we've seen pressure from, and we were talking about this, it's the same thing with the DEI conversation we were having the other day on the Orange Nerd Show, is that it's easier for people to accomplish things when the targets are more narrowly defined. As soon as we start expanding in fact, there's research on this. There's research on this is if you go to do a project and you have more than 3 goals, the likelihood of you achieving those goals continues to drop percentage wise. And so, for example, at the company that I used to work for, we used to say you're not allowed to have more than 4 goals for the year, because if you have more than 4 goals, the problem is going to be that we are going to fail on all but maybe one of them, and it's just a much more difficult thing to do. And so I think that it is really good that we've had pressure for more and better female representation. I think it's really good that we've had pressure for more people of color, for more sexual orientation diversity. All of that representation is fantastic. However, we have to also realize that it's easier to tell those stories as their own stories, as opposed to trying to pigeonhole those things into a different story. We start to detract from what we could have been narrowly focused on. So I don't think that Indiana Jones is attempting at all to I think the female characters are great. I agree with you both. I like the way that they're displayed. Would I say that I would I think a good question for every at least male person to ask, because every female can ask, just like we can ask with Indiana Jones, and you can ask across genders too, of course. I'm not saying you can't, but the natural thing for you to do is to go, do I associate with Indiana Jones and kind of understand where he's coming from? I think a good thing for us to ask is, when we look at a female character, would we want to be married to that character? Would we want to have that character as a daughter or a mother? Does that work for us? Would we like a different character in that role instead? And I do think that there are some times where the female characters in Indiana Jones, with the exception of Marion, I think Marion is a really good character, but with both Elsa, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, and with Willie, I think we're looking at a caricature as opposed to a fully realized female character. And so again, is that bad? I don't know. It makes Indiana Jones' character react and respond to them in ways that that endear us to him and have us understand why he's doing what he's doing. And he misses out on some things too, right? Like he doesn't do some things that he should do because of what's going on. He kind of learns from that. James Bond has a much better close rate with the women that he's in, and a much higher abandon rate than Indiana Jones seems to. These things seem to stick with Indy for longer, which I think is good. But yeah, go ahead, Dre. What were you going to finish up on there?
Okay, so this is the comment right here. This is from Doris Bov 2210. Okay. I don't know what the other guy is talking about. She becomes a screamer later on in the movie. Seriously, oh yeah. That's why Marion was machine gunning down and killing dozens of 1940s Germans of ill repute. Is that why Marion has a higher kill count than Indiana Jones, which is a fact? Indiana Jones keeps getting captured constantly, needs to be saved by Marion. I'm so sick of you guys like you originally saying the truth about Marion being a badass and then downplaying it, lying and distorting the narrative to make Indiana Jones look tough, because he wasn't. He was the damsel in distress, even needed a 9-year-old short round to save him. Give me a break. You guys just can't stand Marion being as tough as Indiana Jones without it bothering you. The truth is that Marion was tougher than Indiana Jones, and that's facts. Oh, yeah. And how many times did Indiana Jones get his ass kicked? Do you say that he's less of a man and a hero because of it? Of course not, because he's a man, so he gets a free pass for being human. But Marion always has to be superhuman. Yeah, right. Most of the time, she is superhuman. It's not good enough. Again, yeah, right. Yeah, Marion cannot even scream. Oh, no. Okay.
So, real quick, Dre, before you go on, you know what I hate the most, man? Mm-hmm. Run-on sentences. That's what I hate.
Yeah, I know. Good, concise points. Okay. Listen, it seems like, that's a little bit of overcompensation for some, maybe personal problems with how that's all structured. I don't mean to attack the messenger, but it just sounds kind of like that. Maybe you want to edit this, maybe, trim up your points. But okay, let's just take on, the what is it? The text given to us, right? I don't think we ever said that Marion was any lesser than Indiana Jones in some of her depictions and in some of the situations that she is put in. We even said ourselves, we were like, would we have necessarily put her in those situations in this day and age? Probably no. We probably would have made some alternative decisions, right? But, she was captured at one point, right? And the bad people were putting her in those decisions, in those specific positions. So it's like, okay, like I get it. Like, understand why that was done in that way. And yeah, I mean, she is an absolute badass who does take down her fair share of 1940s Germans of ill repute, right? So it's like, okay, good. That's all good right there. This is an interesting thing that's done sometimes. It's like, oh, which character is more of a badass? Which character is better, worse, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And I don't really get into that. That much. It's can these characters kind of stand on their own? Are they as compelling as another character? What are the flaws of each character, and how does that contribute to their characters and why we like them, love them, hate them, etc. Right, like that. So in terms of like, if we're talking like Dragon Ball Z power levels and stuff, like that's really dumb, really stupid. Are each capable? And I think in this case, I think they very much are.
Well, and then that kills creativity, I think, too, when you approach it with that Dragon Ball Z power level thing, right? Because you want to approach a story from a storytelling standpoint where when you do that, and Jay, you're a writer and stuff. I mean, you do this all the time. You want to create a story where it's compelling, and if you're just having this competition between who's the bigger badass, doesn't usually make for a compelling story. You need varying types of characters in these stories. You just can't have a lineup of just badasses and who's the best. So yeah, I agree with you on that, Dre. I think that's kind of silly.
I think to take this comment and break it down. This comment is trying to suggest that we were trying to suggest that Marion is not a good character, and that Marion is, and this comment's kind of indicating that Marion may be the best character. And I think what we said in the show, and by the way, we just approached this from a very factual standpoint as well. Sure. Marion is introduced. We said that she's one of the best character introductions in the history of film. So we said that. That's one thing we said. The next thing we said was that she is a perfect counter to Indiana Jones. The first thing she does with Indiana Jones, which we mentioned, was she hits him across the face. Like, this is not somebody who's taking it from him, right?
Right.
She stands up for herself along the way. There are also depictions of her of where they are the locals that were hired by the Germans are grabbing her and kidnapping her. She gets kidnapped multiple times. Does Indy get kidnapped as well? Sure, he does get kidnapped a couple times here as well. But the real thing was mentioned is that after the submarine sequence, from that point in the movie onward, Marion does nothing but stand there and listen to what Indy tells her to do. Yeah. So that's all we said. We said the question, why do we bring these things up on the Story Geeks podcast at all? Because we try to listen to all of the different and various opinions about a piece of art, and we try and take that from all the different angles, giving our opinion, but also understanding the opinions of others. And so what we have to do is I have to come up with a question that says, many people have criticized the representation of female characters in Indiana Jones films. How do we feel about that, gentlemen? And when we have to approach those from different angles. In this case, what we were saying is some people have had problems with the female representation. We kind of understand why, because there's some areas where it does feel like she's a damsel in distress. It feels like Willie's that way as well. You could feel like she's the best character in the history of film and she's a super badass. I think that that's phenomenal. You should totally think that. You should totally feel that way, and you should come up with your reasons for why you feel that way. But it doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree with that. We hear it from both sides all the time, and that's totally cool. Everyone should be able to have their own opinion, and we should be able to have a. So notice. I ask OG, how do you feel about the relationship between Indy and his female characters? And OG says, I really like it. And then I say, cool. OG, can you also address the portion of this where people say the female characters are sometimes not represented well? And OG says, I can kind of see that side of it too. In other words, we're not trying to put out propaganda to you and convince you of something that you shouldn't believe. You should believe whatever you're compelled to believe. And hopefully these conversations can bring about a greater understanding of the film, more questions for you to consider, and maybe those things will shape your opinion in such a way, Doris, that you can say, I think you guys are wrong. I love Marion all the way through the movie. And then we would sit back and go, we love Marion too. It's not confrontational. It's cool. And if we were confrontational, we just go, we have a difference of opinion. Congratulations. That's how 100%. We operate.
Absolutely. 100%. A final point. I think all the women are in this series are capable in their own way. And even though Willie gets kind of the short end of that, I would say, for sure, she still does some stuff in this film that, well, saves everybody and allows the plot to actually move forward, right? And that's what I like about these films. And it's kind of it's unfortunate that she isn't more capable because, there are films in which, you'll see these pieces definitely in modern cinema where it's like, I don't know, you have one person doing everything and the other person gets left behind, maybe for, a specific reason or two or whatever. I like characters to be capable across the board. I think the women of Indiana Jones are for sure. And even though Willie doesn't do, I think, as much as I would like her to do. And Jay, you even said that when you were coming in here. Yeah. It's like it doesn't mean that we like her any less. Marion is especially capable, and hopefully, what we are saying here doesn't degrade your thoughts on it. Hopefully, it just kind of expands your mindset related to all these things.
Yeah, well said.
And we have to say too, by all accounts, and from everything that I've seen about Kate Capshaw, she is a wonderful human being. so I think it's one. I mean, let's put it this way: Steven Spielberg had directed her to be this way, and then yet decided to marry her. I mean, come on! I mean, like this is like real life now involved in this thing. So. But we really appreciate the comments, and to showcase how different opinions can be out there. I'm going to read a couple tweets that I got. I tweeted out our question number 3 from tonight, which was tonally, does this movie work or does it not work? I just want to read to you some of the various opinions that we got out on Twitter from our friends. My buddy Nerd Soul Michael Young said everything. That's what works, everything. So he loves the tonal differences of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He's in. The Candid Camper said it's all about the raft and the waterfall, which is obviously my biggest problem with it, and I think that's a joke related to that. So that's funny too. Our super friend, we'll call him our super friend, Mr. Theme Park Casual, said the outlandish and truly unbelievable escapes were what I didn't like. In Raiders, everything felt somewhat plausible or possible. And so Theme Park Casual and I have a kind of a shared understanding, a shared approach to what that looks like. By the way, he got 3 likes on that one. And then Indiana Jim, who has a fantastic Twitter handle, said, it all works. What are you talking about? Smiley face. So just to give you a little bit of perspective, even amongst our friends who we operate all the time with on Twitter, who come onto the shows, none of us agree. So if you ever hear us agreeing, it's just wait long enough and we'll disagree on something else.
Exactly.
Before switching the topic over, I wanted to go ahead and bring this up too. One of the things that's very unique to Temple of Doom, amongst all the rest, you could say, Crystal Skull kind of does this. Last Crusade kind of dabbles in this, but not really. The family dynamic that's in here with Short Round, with Willie. It's kind of this mother-father kind of, son type relationship right here. It's really done, quite well. You know, it's like the parents are always arguing, they're always you know kind of in fights or whatever. You got the young capable kid who's kind of scrappy himself. He's like the pickpocket. He can do kind of anything right there. I always kind of loved how, for example, right, there's a shot, I believe, if I can find it right here, and then OG, you can share my screen, when they're on the plane and they're going to sleep right here, right? And it's right before the pilots abandoned it, and you know. But you see this right here, like Short Round kind of laying on Indy. You know, you kind of get a sense that Indy only likes one person in this world, and it's Short Round. In fact, he actually allows him to wear the famous fedora, right? He doesn't even allow Mutt to wear the fedora, but he allows he allows Short Round to wear it. And, you know, you kind of really get a bond there. And honestly, it wasn't just a bond on screen, but from what we have now seen from his interactions with Short Round as a grown-up, that bond is still very much in place. And I always thought, man, you know, what a missed opportunity not to bring back Short Round for Dial of Destiny. I think that would have been absolutely perfect. Now, they do have a Short Round type character in there in Dial of Destiny, as you'll see when the film actually comes out. It's interesting because they really do kind of make Phoebe Waller-Bridge to be kind of this next Indy, but not going all the way with that. It's interesting when you talked about how, you know, this also is kind of dealing with the familial thing a little bit, but his relationship with females, right? And how it's like, I think it does enhance his character. It's interesting because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is put in that same situation where she's kind of, you know, guy hungry, and she sleeps around apparently in the next film, and apparently doesn't play quite as well as when, you know, when the creators examining the previous films under Indy, how they felt or how they thought he was being depicted in there, and they replicate that for Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Doesn't work quite as well, but besides that fact, I think the familial dynamic here that you see on screen is actually quite good, and really does enhance and raise the stakes for this film quite considerably.
Well, you bring up a great point with that, Dre. Like they're a family unit here. You know, this is father and son, whether they're blood or not. It's like a father and son. You know, there's a real love, there's a real bond there. And then, like you said, you have mom and dad are always fighting, right? Him and Willie are always arguing, and she's always pissed off. I love it. I absolutely love it. But what this really boils down to, though, is basically what you're saying, Dre, is that maybe in Dial of Destiny, he should pass the fedora on to Short Round. And he becomes Indiana Jones. That almost seems like the natural thing, right?
Exactly.
Well, especially with the rise of Ke Huy Quan. And I have to say this, too, because I watched. So for those who don't know, the actor who plays Short Round, Ke Huy Quan, he was in Goonies. He was in Temple of Doom, two really big movies in the 80s. But after that, he didn't get a lot of roles in Hollywood. And he's talked about that extensively. And he's talked about how he would actually he would get birthday presents from Steven Spielberg every year when he was a kid, after he was in this film. So there was a familial connection even with the people. And this is like Spielberg's wife that he marries after this film. This is he sends gifts to Short Round for his birthday. Ke Huy Quan in real life. And one of the things that has happened is that Ke Huy Quan has actually had a resurgence in his career because of Everything Everywhere All at Once. He's going to be in a few more things as well. Right. So it would have been really fascinating if we would have got something like that, and to see how I think of all the people who have appeared in an Indiana Jones film who Harrison Ford could have given his fedora to, maybe the only one that makes sense is Short Round.
Right?
Because,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think
that would have been a really kind of cool thing to do, right? Bring this character back that everybody loves, and heck, I mean, they still have that chemistry even today. I mean, every single time Harrison Ford, you know, sees this guy in a crowd, it's like, hey, you know, it's my son over there. You know, there's this really kind of bond that still exists. It's like, man, why didn't you recapture that? You know, if there is any spiritual successor to this character, it might be Ke Huy Quan's character with Short Round. It's interesting. Have you heard the story about how he got the role?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. So his brother auditioned for the role, and he was there in order to add moral support for him and to kind of help him and coach him through his audition process. And while he was actually doing all of this, the filmmakers and casters were kind of like, maybe you should audition for the role. You're actually doing pretty good here. And I kind of stole the role from his brother, but that's how Short Round was cast. And this is amongst thousands of kids who were actually auditioned for the role. It's quite phenomenal that he stands out, even not only amongst the people who auditioned, but the people who didn't. So quite interesting.
Is it true? And I correct me, fellas, if I'm wrong. When he was in this movie, he changed his name, right? And he only recently changed his name back to his real name, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I heard that's the case, and I'll have to look into it, but it was because his real name was obviously very, very Vietnamese. And at this time in the 80s, we talked about like the different eras and what have you. It was harder for him to get work, if he used his real name. So he went by another name. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But if it's true, I'm glad he went back to his real name, and I'm glad he's doing fantastic now. Love the guy. How do you not love the guy?
How do you not love him? Yeah. I'll say one more thing about Short Round, since we didn't get to talk to him. I thought he might come up earlier in the questions, but he hasn't. So while we wait for Dre to pop back in, because I have one more question for you guys. I'll just say this. I think Short Round is a very odd inclusion from a storytelling standpoint, and yet it works phenomenally well. I mean, like the fact that, like, I think Dre hit the nail on the head. This is a very familial movie where all of these people care about one another. They care about getting through this process together. They're not put in the process. They're not put in this place of their own choice, but having to work their way out of it. They have to work together to be able to do that. And despite the fact they have distinct personalities and distinct ways of viewing the world, and we have whole action sequences with Short Round. He's a huge part of the action sequence when they escape from Club Obi-Wan, and then he's a part of the action sequence where he's saving the child kids from the slavery. So the fact that he is involved in those two sequences so heavily is really phenomenal, and I'm just really glad that we got to see Short Round as a character here, because I think he's a powerful addition to this film for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's a hero. He's a hero in this movie.
He's a hero. He's a hero.
He's awesome. He's awesome.
I love Short Round. He kind of embodies the little kids who grew up kind of watching this and wanted to be in Indiana Jones Adventure. You gotta live vicariously through Short Round. It's cool. It's great.
Yeah. See, we're gonna get Dre to say it's a 9 out of 10. We're gonna get
well, you're doing a pretty good job there so far.
I was talking to Jay. Maybe you know the answer to this, Dre. But if I'm not mistaken, did he change his name? I thought I heard somewhere that he had a stage name when he was a young kid, because it was harder for him to get work with his real Vietnamese name, and only recently he changed it back to his real name. Have you heard that as well?
I have not, but I can go ahead and look it up right now.
Check it out. I thought he did, but I thought that was kind of cool that he changed it back. Good for him. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, this is gonna Dre, let us know when you've got an answer for that. But
sure,
I've got one more question for us, and I am coming to the experts, because if anybody's theme park experts, it's OG55 and Mr. VashSky. Now, Citrus George is in here, but he's also an expert. We could have get in his opinion on this. But because Orange Grove 55 is also a parks channel, and a phenomenal parks channel at that, we've got to talk about the Indiana Jones theme park experiences. We have Temple of the Forbidden Eye at Disneyland. We have Temple of, just keep note of how many temples there are here. Temple of the Forbidden Eye at Disneyland, the Stunt Spectacular at Hollywood Studios out in Walt Disney World, Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar in Disney Springs, which is a deeper cut, but an awesome deeper cut, Temple of the Crystal Skull at Tokyo Disney Sea, so another Temple of, and Temple du Peril at Disneyland Paris. Yeah, my French is horrible, by the way. So you can lambast me in the comments. Doris, if you're out there and you know that my French is bad, let me know about it. What are your thoughts on these attractions? Do they live up to the film catalog? Which ones do, which ones don't? Which ones have you experienced personally? And what do you think about all of this? OG, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Dre.
Yeah, I've only, admittedly, I've only experienced one of these, the Indiana Jones Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye at Disneyland. That will change though very soon. That will change very soon. But I think that attraction did a textbook flawless interpretation of the Indiana Jones films and putting it into an attraction. I mean, between the rolling ball, the fire, all the snakes, you go through, like you're kind of on, it's kind of interesting with the queue line, you're kind of on your own like archaeology expedition almost, right? You're going through these little weavy little tunnels and stuff. Just a masterclass at how to do it right. I mean, I don't know. That ride is incredible to me. It really is kind of like this modern day Pirates of the Caribbean in a lot of ways. They took what Walt started with Pirates and just took it to the next level, and it holds up very, very well today. Tokyo's is very similar to ours. They have a couple of added special effects in their version, but pretty much the same attraction. I haven't seen the stunt show at Hollywood Studios. I'm not like super into stunt shows, so I don't know. I'll have to kind of wait and see on that. And then the roller coaster at Paris, I believe, is the minecart, right? If I'm not mistaken.
It is the minecart, yeah.
That's kind of cool. But I don't know. I still think that the one that we have and the one that Tokyo has, it just takes everything and puts it in this. It's like this kind of like this Indiana Jones gumbo, you know? It just got it all. It's got the boulder, the snakes, the fire, it's everything. I love it. Just like, yeah. What do you think, Dr. Dre?
Well, it's definitely a gumbo, that is for sure. And talk about experts there, Jay. I think you are correct right there. Decoder card, gotta have it. Gotta have it for sure. Just an incredible attraction, and really kind of embodies the spirit of Indiana Jones in a way, man, just kind of unparalleled, you know? I mean, yeah, there have been some amazing Star Wars adventures, but, you know, getting to that great, I don't know, that mix of elements right there, I don't think it's done quite as well as what Indiana Jones does to harken back to its kind of IP or franchise sake. So I think it's done phenomenally well. And honestly, I think Indiana Jones was we talked about this in Raiders, but, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark inspired Tony to say, hey, I think we have the next Walt Disney. He's George Lucas. We got to get this guy in the building. Started those conversations with Ron Miller. Unfortunately, those didn't quite pan out, but now you have Michael Eisner ushered in there shortly thereafter. That relationship has started. And from that point on, Tony Baxter's like, man, if we could create an attraction that embodies the adventure of what we actually saw, the roller coaster that we actually saw, this would be phenomenal to do. And that's kind of the genesis for the Indiana Jones Adventure out there in Disneyland, which I think, like you said, OG, I mean, yeah, they do have the, what is it, the almost like a minecart type adventure when it comes to like the Paris version and stuff like that. And they were supposed to, if you want to share my screen real fast,
I got you.
They were supposed to have that for the Indiana Jones Adventure itself. You can see right here, you can see like inversion right in the middle of there. Yeah, that's the minecart coaster that you were supposed to be on.
Well, and even crazier is on the far right, you can see the Jungle Cruise was actually going to go through the show building.
Yep.
I mean, this was insane what they were planning on doing with this ride.
Oh yeah, and you can see in the kind of the center of your screen, the very top of frame right there, you can see the railroad going through as well right there. So it would have, I mean, this was supposed to be a huge attraction, just on a scale unthinkable. And yes, even though Indiana Jones Adventure was ultimately big, this was supposed to be even grander. And the way they were supposed to like delineate between the Jeep adventure and the minecart adventure was like in the queue, you would have this kind of room that would separate the people out, and one side would get the Jeep, one side would get the minecart, and you get an experience through a lot of the same show scenes, and they would kind of interact and play with each other. Very, very cool stuff. You wish that they would have done it, but you can even see some slave children right down there. Which there's a great video. I think it was like the 20th anniversary, I want to say, or the 30th anniversary. It should have been the 20th anniversary, right? Something like that. On this, they had it out in the where Star Wars Galaxy's Edge sits today in the old.
Oh yeah, I went to that, by the way.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Hunchback of Notre Dame kind of Festival of
Yep.
Fools area.
Yep.
Right. And it was a sit down with Tony Baxter, right?
That's right.
And he talks about the development of this attraction and, asking guests like what they would want to see from an Indiana Jones adventure. What are the things that we can put in this gumbo, to your point, OG, and add it all in there and stuff like that. Got a lot from the Rolling Boulder that obviously made it in. Spikes, bugs, all of that. And I think this is why you brought up this question at all, Jay, because Temple of Doom, and maybe you can include pieces of Raiders, but Temple of Doom more than any other is where Imagineers really got their inspiration to include as elements in this attraction right here. So we got the spikes, we got the bugs, we got skeletons, we got all that kind of stuff, and those are some of the comments that were actually made by guests I wanted to see. One of them did say slave children, so that they were depicted at least in some form early on. Didn't make the final cut, however, but it's just phenomenal. Phenomenal attraction as it exists today. I actually like it more in the Tokyo version. Tokyo version does have some really cool elements, but I think the kind of fire and brimstone, the look and feel of this, I think they really nailed it here with the 1995 version.
One missed opportunity though with this is that we didn't get the yellow raft drop ride from the ceiling down.
That's right.
Oh, that is fantastic. Yeah.
That might have been a great
That's
ride.
for the Indiana Jones land coming to Disney's Animal Kingdom. That's saving that one.
That would be so cool. So of these, I'll tell you what. I've been to, obviously, Temple of Forbidden Eye at Disneyland. Obviously, I've been to the Stunt Spectacular, Hollywood Studios. I've been to Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar in Disney Springs. Maybe you guys will get an opportunity to go there. Now, let me make a couple comments about it before I did do the ride vehicle, the ride watch throughs on. You can find YouTube videos of ride watch throughs. So I did watch the other two as well. I think that Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar is awesome because of all the little Easter eggs inside Jock Lindsay's bar. I love the atmosphere. There's multiple pictures of me that my wife and I have taken inside Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar just because I'm such a big Indiana Jones fan and I love the era. I love the music they're playing. I love all that stuff. I have one complaint, and that is I don't think that they're anywhere close to the best drinks on property. And so therefore maybe go for even the snacks or maybe not the best snacks. So you're going for the ambiance. You're not going for the food and drink there. Right. So I'll give that caveat. The Stunt Spectacular, unfortunately, I have an active. I won't say I actively dislike it, but it's very actively mediocre to me. And the reason for that is because all of these other things immerse you in the world of Indiana Jones. Right. The Stunt Spectacular essentially says, this is how Indiana Jones stunts are done. It's not trying. Yeah, it takes the curtain back. And that to me is a big miss. I would much rather watch an hour-long Indiana Jones stage play. Like that would be cool to me. Like do that kind of like what you might see at Knott's Berry Farm when they do the cowboy show or even the Water World show over at I guess that's at Universal, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I would rather see a different story of Indiana Jones seen live as opposed to pulling back the curtain and being like, this is how we kind of do this, and this is how you kind of reveal this, and we pulled people from the audience and they're going to do this. That to me it takes me out of it, and it just makes me go like, this is not that interesting to me anymore. So I think that's a skip. But Temple of the Forbidden Eye, I said this last week on the show last week because of course we had to get into it last week too. You could film a movie at the Temple of the Forbidden Eye at Disneyland. Yeah. Like is how high quality that experience is. You mentioned the queue, especially opening day queue. I'm so glad they brought this back. But the pole that you push, the bamboo pole that you push, and the ceiling comes down with the spikes. That's coming right out of the film. It's coming right out of Temple of Doom. You walk in and there's an explorer down. You can kind of mess with his rope, and he's like kind of yelling at you from down below. You're inside the temple when he's doing that. So phenomenal. And I don't think to this day, I think Rise of the Resistance comes close. But there is not another effect like the ball rolling down at you in any theme park that I've ever been to. That experience alone is so. I've been on this ride probably 100 times, if I'm not mistaken. That still brings a smile to my face anytime I step on the Indiana Jones ride. I've seen it a billion times. I've seen it not work, by the way, too. And the way that effect is created is just. It's just out of this world, and it just puts a smile on your face.
Oh, it does, and when you do it that first time, it kind of scares you because you're like, well, how are we going to get out of this? Like, it's coming right at us. What's going to happen? You know?
Yep.
It's amazing.
Watch the floor when that happens right there, and watch how the walls actually move and the interplay in light and how that all kind of goes, and it is. Super convincing. I mean, these scenes have to be like 18 seconds or less, right? So you have to go through them very, very quickly because of your dispatch intervals. And this scene is like right at 17 and a half seconds. I mean, it's right there, and that's why it doesn't necessarily reset as well as maybe some other of those sequences, which is a shame. But I mean, just to put it in perspective of how just dedicated everybody was to bringing this Indiana Jones adventure to life. There's a really great article on Disney Dose right here featuring an interview with composer Richard Bellis, and he arranged a lot of the John Williams scores for the actual attraction itself. And it's kind of crazy because in this interview they actually detail how it's like, okay, well, we have to we have to arrange this composition in such a way that we have to have a string of cues back to back, and they kind of get you through the adventure. And every single time you enter a new room or something happens, you have a new musical cue and stuff like that. You have to have long tails so they overlap each other for certain points in the ride in which they don't, necessarily perfectly align. And they talk about some of the technical aspects of the actual attraction itself. Like, for example, right here, one of the most exciting musical features of the ride is that each row is equipped with 5 speakers used solely for music playback. This means that each rider has his or her own stereo pair because the layout of the 5 speakers is left channel, right channel, left channel, right channel. Some people will have a reverse stereo image, but hey, when you're being tossed around, who cares what side the violins are on? That's pretty cool right there. Yeah. But they talk about how they had to ride this like over and over and over in order to get kind of like a sense of what to do here. So he talks about this. He says right here, they brought like notepads and stuff like that. He bought like notepads and pencils to take down, like where in which this is actually gonna fly. But it's like they've never ridden on this before, so the first time, everything's flying everywhere, and they lose their notepad, they lose their pencils, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, this isn't actually gonna work right here. It says, go, I confidently say as we start into the darkness. Okay, next time we bring flashlights. We ascend the first ramp, moving closer to Mara, the huge godhead with smoke emanating from her eyes. Adam is taking notes and squinting at his stopwatch. Ed is waiting for the turn to the left as we pass Mara. Here it comes, lurch! The legal pad jumps a foot off his lap, but he manages to catch it, which is the good news. The bad news is he didn't start his watch. And they're trying to watch it, right? In order to get the cues timed out. All right, forget that one. We'll get the skeletons in the catacombs next. Get ready, go! Adam, who manages to start his watch, is frantically holding on to a stopwatch with one hand, his legal pad with the other, and able to write as we blaze through the catacombs. Remember these times, he shouts. 18 seconds, 22 seconds, 25 and a half. We jolt to a slowdown. Uncontrollable laughter, during which we miss the next timing. All right, let's go. Let's get the next one. Here it comes. The vehicle suddenly stops dead end. This is not supposed to happen. Oh, well, we'll chalk it this first trip up to experience. Let's just go back, start, and try again. 15 minutes later, we're still sitting in the middle of a suspension bridge while engineers are inspecting the track. They had obviously done this before. They had flashlights. But, they go around like 22 times or whatever trying to get this thing. And then at the end there, it says... What followed, of course, was the agony of spotting session that that was worth it. An 86-piece orchestra for an afternoon at Todd A.O. playing what seemed like a medley of John Williams chase cues. I think at the end of the 4-hour session, the string players felt much like we did after the spotting session. So just getting the music right for this was an adventure and a half, right? And what would Indiana Jones be like without the iconic music, and how that sets the tone for the actual attraction, how that ups the ante? I mean, I remember when my mom actually rode this the first time without me because I was a little bit too short. You know, when that music started blaring, she was like, "Oh my God, he's got to get on this," and that's what ultimately compelled her to skirt the rules just a little bit. You know, put the wedges in the shoes and get me on for the first time. And it is absolutely phenomenal. So it's just that perfect recipe, like you said there, Jay. And I will say that, you know, the Stunt Spectacular, it's had its troubled history, and I think it will be reformatted at a certain point right there. But a couple of cool facts about it: we were going to get a version of the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular in Disneyland originally. It was going to be based on the Young Indiana Jones adventures, and they were actually going to include the railroad into it. It was going to be where Galaxy's Edge is currently right now, and you were going to have Young Indiana Jones, you know, like run on top of the Disneyland railroad cars and have it interact in the show and stuff like that. A very ambitious idea that obviously got scrapped for the attraction eventually, but there's a great video on YouTube. So for the people listening this far, here's a little treat for you. Great video on YouTube featuring a Star Wars celebration at Disney's Hollywood Studios for the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. They actually took Star Wars, right? And they like meshed it with Indiana Jones, and they invited George Lucas to see this menagerie, and he's sitting in the audience while you have Indiana Jones fighting Darth Vader.
Oh, that's crazy.
And you have like Marion turn into Princess Leia, and she's wearing the, you know, what is it? Return of the Jedi bikini. You know what I'm talking about right there? And it is wild. It is the craziest thing I have ever seen a theme park actually put on. You definitely got to seek this out. Star Wars meets Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. It's very, very fun. And we did get some stunts of our own in Adventureland for the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but we'll get back to that when we get to that adventure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Dre, we can still hear you, but you have frozen. I think we're gonna. Again. I think we're gonna close it out though. So you want me to? You want to just hang tight and we'll close it out, or you want to?
I'll do my intro right. I'll do my outro right here, and I'll save the audience from having me retie in again. I don't know what's going on, folks. I do apologize, but if you guys want to go ahead and follow me, you can go and do so at VashSky. It's right there at the bottom of my frozen screen, probably right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55. Definitely hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you so much for having me on, Jay. It was a blast. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. We'll get you on for the next one. Thanks for dropping in, Dre. So OG, this is a good movie. We didn't clarify with Dre about whether we bumped him up to a 9, but I'm gonna say we bumped him up to a 9. And I think we did. Yeah, I think we did.
I think we did. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, we got him to say that. But thanks for joining me, OG. Where can people find you, and where can they get some of your insights, both from theme parks and all the other things that we're talking about with Disney?
Well, Jay, I just want to thank you so much for, as always, being a gracious host. Had a great time today talking Temple of Doom with you. Looking forward to what next one is, Last Crusade.
Last Crusade.
Gonna be really fun. To keep it on theme, that's gonna be a ball, right? Like a giant ball.
Exactly.
But again, thank you, brother. This is a fantastic conversation we had today, and you can find me on Twitter at Orange Grove 55. You can also find me here on YouTube, Orange Grove 55. And here, you know what? Since Dre isn't here, I feel obligated to drop some kind of drop. Let's see what we got here. Here, we'll do this one. There we go.
Yes, good drop. One of my favorites. Well, thank you, OG. That was an absolute pleasure talking to you today. If folks want to find me, they can find me on Twitter at Jay Sherer, Sherer. If you're listening to this on How Stories Work, you're going to hear another segment of me talking about some of the storytelling things that we can learn from Temple of Doom. But in the meantime, go if you're listening to the audio only version of this, go subscribe to the video version over at Orange Grove 55's YouTube channel. And if you're watching the video, you can always subscribe to the other channel as well for How Stories Work. And that will conclude today's show. So thanks everybody for listening, and let us know if you have any comments on what we discussed in this episode. We will talk to you on the next one. Last Crusade. Stay tuned. We got Last Crusade. We've got Crystal Skull, and then I'm going to see Dial of Destiny on Thursday. So I will be doing a show sometime in mid-July on Dial of Destiny as well. So be sure to stay for all of those, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.